A young woman was about to give up after being pushed to the ground, with no chance to defend herself. But suddenly, a wild lynx appeared and stopped the attacker in a way no one could have ever imagined. What this animal did changed everything, and the ending will shock you even more. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us until the end of this story that will move you deeply. Emma Taylor pressed her forehead against the bus window, watching as the sprawling concrete landscape of Chicago gradually gave way to the rolling hills and dense forests of rural Montana. The subtle vibration of the glass against her skin was oddly comforting, a rhythmic reminder that she was moving, not just physically, but emotionally, back to a place she'd once called home. 3 years had passed since her last visit to Whispering Pines, the small mountain town where her grandmother Martha lived, in a modest cabin surrounded by towering pine trees and wilderness that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Emma had been so consumed by her work as a graphic designer in the city, by deadlines and client meetings, that calls with Grandma Martha had become shorter, less frequent, and increasingly filled with awkward silences that neither knew how to bridge. "Next stop, Whispering Pines," the bus driver announced, his voice crackling through the speakers. Emma gathered her backpack and small suitcase, taking a deep breath. Spring break had finally arrived, and instead of joining her colleagues on a trip to Florida, she'd made a last-minute decision to visit her grandmother. The choice wasn't entirely spontaneous. A late-night phone call from Martha 2 weeks ago had stayed with Emma, haunting her thoughts. "I miss seeing your face, sweetie," Martha had said, her voice carrying a weight that transcended the phone line. "The forest misses you too." It was the kind of thing Martha always said, attributing emotions to the natural world, as if the trees and wildlife were as much her family as Emma was. Once, Emma had believed it too. The bus pulled into the small station, really just a covered bench and a ticket office, and Emma stepped out into the crisp mountain air. The scent of pine and fresh earth immediately enveloped her, triggering memories of childhood summers spent exploring the woods, picking wild berries, and listening to her grandmother's stories by the fireplace. "Emma, is that you?" She turned to see a familiar figure walking toward her. Tom Wilson, Martha's neighbor who ran the local general store. He'd aged since she'd last seen him, gray now predominant in his beard, but his smile remained unchanged. "Hey, Tom," she replied, accepting a warm hug. "Grandma Martha sent you." "Sure did. Said her favorite granddaughter was coming home and deserved a proper welcome." He took her suitcase. "Come on, truck's over here. Martha's been baking all morning. The whole cabin smells like apple pie." DC. 15-minute drive to Martha's cabin took them deeper into the forest, along winding roads bordered by dense pines. Emma felt a gradual unwinding inside her, the constant tension she carried in the city slowly beginning to release. "How is she really?" Emma asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Tom glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "She's Martha, strong as ever, talks to the trees, knows what weather's coming before the forecast does." He paused. "But she misses you, talks about you all the time." Guilt settled in Emma's stomach. Her grandmother had been her anchor growing up, especially after her parents' divorce. Somehow, adult life had made it too easy to drift away. The truck rounded a final bend, and Martha's cabin came into view, a sturdy 2-bedroom structure, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. It looked exactly as Emma remembered, as if time had simply paused here while racing forward everywhere else. Standing on the porch, wearing her signature blue apron and with her silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, was Martha Taylor. At 72, she still stood straight-backed and tall, her face weathered but her blue eyes, the same shade as Emma's, bright and alert. Emma barely waited for the truck to stop before jumping out. Something in her chest expanded painfully as she rushed toward the porch. "There's my girl," Martha said, opening her arms. The embrace felt like coming home in a way that transcended the physical location. Martha smelled of baking spices, lavender soap, and something uniquely her. An earthy, comforting scent that Emma had unconsciously sought in every candle she'd purchased for her sterile city apartment. "I've missed you, Grandma," Emma whispered, surprised by the sudden thickness in her throat. "Well, you're here now," Martha replied simply, pulling back to look at her granddaughter's face. Her eyes crinkled with a smile. "Just in time for spring awakening. The forest has been waiting. For you." After helping Emma settle into her old room, preserved exactly as she'd left it after high school, complete with faded band posters and bookshelves lined with fantasy novels, Martha served apple pie at the kitchen table. Through the window, Emma could see the tree line of the forest, dark and dense, stretching up the mountainside. "So," Martha said, pouring tea from a worn ceramic pot, "tell me about this city life that keeps you so busy you forget your old grandma." There was no accusation in her tone, only gentle teasing, but Emma felt the sting nonetheless. "I haven't forgotten you," she protested. "It's just complicated. Work deadlines, trying to build a portfolio, networking events. All important things," Martha nodded, "but not everything." The simplicity of the statement hung between them. Emma looked down at her pie, suddenly less hungry. "I thought we could go walking tomorrow," Martha continued, changing the subject. "There's a new trail I discovered last year. Follows alongside Blackwater Creek for a while, then winds through some of the oldest trees in the forest. It's peaceful there, special." Emma nodded, relieved by the shift in conversation. "I'd like that. I brought my hiking boots." Later that evening, as darkness settled over the forest and the sounds of nocturnal creatures began their symphony outside, Emma sat on the porch swing beside her grandmother. The night air was cool but not uncomfortable, and Martha had draped a handmade quilt over their laps. "The stars are different here," Emma observed, looking up at the vast canopy of twinkling lights overhead. "In Chicago, you're lucky if you can see a handful through the light pollution." Martha followed her gaze upward. "The world tries so hard to make us forget what's real," she said softly. "Covers up the stars, drowns out the bird song with traffic, replaces the scent of pine with exhaust." She reached over and patted Emma's hand. "That's why we need places like this, to remember." Emma felt something inside her shift, like a door long closed, creaking open just a fraction. That night, she slept better than she had in months, lulled by the gentle chorus of crickets and the soft rustling of wind through pine needles instead of the honking horns and sirens of Chicago. The next morning dawned clear and bright. After a hearty breakfast of pancakes and fresh berries, Martha led Emma to the edge of the property where a narrow trail disappeared into the trees. "Janice Thompson, you remember her, lives about a mile down the road. She told me about this trail," Martha explained as they set off. "Said it's quieter than the main paths, with the prettiest little stream at the end. I've been meaning to explore it." Emma nodded, already feeling the city's grip on her loosening with each step into the forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine sap and rich earth, and sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden shafts that seemed almost solid enough to touch. "You seem different," Martha observed after they'd been walking for nearly half an hour. "Tense, like you're carrying something heavy." Emma considered deflecting, but found she didn't have the energy. "I don't know who I am anymore, Grandma," she admitted quietly. "In Chicago, I'm always performing, being what everyone needs me to be. I thought that was what I wanted. The career, the busy social calendar, but lately it feels empty." Martha didn't immediately respond, simply nodding as they continued walking. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful, as if the forest itself was considering Emma's words. "We all lose our way sometimes," Martha finally said. "But the path back to yourself is always there. Sometimes it just gets overgrown, and you need to clear away the brush. As they rounded a bend in the trail, the trees thinned slightly, and Emma caught a glimpse of what lay ahead, a stretch of path that seemed to narrow, bordered by tall pines that created a kind of natural corridor, with the promise of water glinting in the distance. "That must be the creek Janice mentioned," Martha said, pointing ahead. "Shall we?" Emma nodded, feeling a strange mix of peace and anticipation as they walked toward the waiting path. The path narrowed as they continued, the underbrush growing denser on either side. Martha had fallen a bit behind, pausing occasionally to examine wildflowers or interesting fungi growing on fallen logs. Emma found herself walking alone, drawn forward by the increasing sound of rushing water ahead. "I'll catch up with you," Martha called. "Just want to gather some of these morels. They're perfect right now." Emma waved in acknowledgement and continued forward. The forest had grown unusually quiet, she realized. The birdsong that had accompanied them earlier had faded. Only the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant sound of water remained. There was something almost reverent about the silence, as if the forest were holding its breath. The trail curved sharply, and Emma slowed her pace, noticing how the ground dropped off steeply to her right. One misstep here could mean a nasty fall. She placed her feet more carefully, feeling the give of the soft earth beneath her boots. The familiar connection to the natural world, something she'd taken for granted as a child but had almost forgotten in the city, began to reawaken in her. She approached a section where tree roots crossed the path like gnarled fingers, creating natural steps down a short incline. The sound of water was louder now, beckoning her forward. As she descended the root steps, a small clearing came into view, bordered by a chattering creek that cut through the forest floor. Sunlight dappled the water's surface, creating dancing patterns that mesmerized Emma. She stood still, breathing deeply, allowing herself to be fully present in the moment. That's when she heard it, the snap of a twig, followed by the rustle of movement through underbrush. Emma turned, expecting to see her grandmother, but instead a man emerged from a side trail she hadn't noticed before. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair and the kind of outdoor clothing that suggested he was comfortable in these woods. Nothing about his appearance was immediately alarming. He could easily have been a hiker or local resident, but something instinctive made Emma tense. "Oh, hello there," he said, his voice pleasant and even. "Didn't expect to run into anyone out here." His smile seemed genuine enough, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hi," Emma responded, automatically matching his casual tone while taking a subtle step back. "Yeah, it's pretty secluded." "Are you from around here?" he asked, moving closer. "I think I'm a bit turned around. These trails can get confusing." "My grandmother lives nearby," Emma replied vaguely, not wanting to offer too much information. "The main trail is back that way." She pointed in the direction she'd come from. "Your grandmother?" His eyebrows raised slightly. "Martha Taylor, by any chance?" The fact that he knew her grandmother's name should have been reassuring. It suggested he was indeed a local, but instead it sent a chill through Emma. Martha knew most people in Whispering Pines, but the way this man asked the question felt oddly calculated. "Do you know her?" Emma asked, deflecting. The man smiled again. "Everyone knows Martha, town treasure, isn't she? With all her forest knowledge and special connection to the land." There was something in his tone, a subtle mockery, that raised Emma's guard further. She glanced back up the trail, wishing her grandmother would appear. "Well, like I said, the main trail is that way," she repeated, gesturing again. "I should get going. My grandmother will be wondering where I am." She turned to leave, but the man stepped sideways, blocking her path. "What's your hurry? It's not every day I meet someone new out here. Most locals know better than to wander these particular trails." "What do you mean by that?" Emma asked, her mouth suddenly dry. He shrugged, moving closer still. "Just that there are parts of these woods that can be dangerous, easy to get lost, easy to disappear. The threat wasn't explicit, but it hung in the air between them. Emma felt her heart rate accelerate. She scanned her surroundings quickly, the steep drop-off to her right, the creek behind her, the man blocking the path back to the main trail. Her options were limited. "I really need to go," she said firmly, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "My grandmother is right behind me." The man chuckled. "I don't think so. I came from that direction. Didn't see any little old ladies picking mushrooms." He reached out suddenly and gripped her arm. "Why don't we talk a bit longer? I've been watching you, you know, since you arrived yesterday. City girl coming back to the woods. It's interesting." The admission that he'd been watching her sent a spike of fear through Emma's body. She jerked her arm away, but his grip tightened painfully. "Let go of me," she demanded, her voice stronger than she expected. "Just want to talk," he insisted, his pleasant facade crumbling. "Get to know the granddaughter Martha's always bragging." "About—" Emma twisted her arm and managed to break free of his grasp. She stepped back, her heel catching on an exposed root. Before she could regain her balance, she was falling backward, landing hard on the forest floor. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs, leaving her momentarily stunned. The man advanced, his expression shifting from false friendliness to something darker. "Now look what you've done," he said, his voice lower. "Could have hurt yourself. These woods aren't safe for someone who doesn't know them." Emma scrambled backward, dirt and pine needles digging into her palms. Her mind raced through her limited options. There was no cell service here, no one within earshot except possibly her grandmother, who was too far behind to hear a shout. The creek was at her back, preventing further retreat. For a moment, a crushing sense of helplessness washed over her. The man took another step forward, and Emma froze, her body tensing for whatever might come next. But before either of them could move, a low, rumbling growl cut through the forest silence. The sound was so unexpected, so primal, that both Emma and the man turned toward its source. From a tangle of underbrush to their left, a large shape emerged. A mountain lion, its muscular body moving with fluid grace as it padded into the clearing. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The mountain lion was magnificent. Tawny fur catching the dappled sunlight, powerful shoulders bunched slightly as if ready to spring, amber eyes fixed not on her, but on the man who stood between them. Time seemed to suspend in that moment. Emma remained motionless on the ground, afraid that any movement might redirect the predator's attention toward her. The man had gone rigid, his earlier confidence evaporating as he faced this new threat. "What the hell?" he muttered, taking a half step back. The mountain lion responded with another growl, deeper this time, and took a deliberate step forward. Its positioning was strange, Emma realized through her fear. It had placed itself between her and the man, as if forming a living barrier. "Get out of here!" the man hissed at the animal, waving his arms in an attempt to scare it off. "Go on! Get!" The mountain lion didn't budge. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, its tail beginning to twitch in a way that even Emma, with her limited knowledge of wild animals, recognized as a warning. The man looked around frantically, then bent to pick up a fallen branch. He swung it threateningly toward the mountain lion. "I said, get out of here!" When he lunged forward with the branch, the mountain lion reacted with startling speed. It didn't attack, but sidestepped the swing and let out a snarl that seemed to shake the very air. The sound was terrifying in its intensity, a clear declaration that the mountain lion would not be intimidated. The sudden movement caused the man to stumble backward, losing his grip on the branch. In that moment of imbalance, Emma saw her chance. She scrambled to her feet and bolted toward the trail, heart pounding in her ears. She didn't look back, focused only on putting distance between herself and the dangerous situation behind her. The forest blurred around her as she ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Branch whipped her face, roots threatened to trip her, but adrenaline carried her forward. "Grandma!" she called out as soon as she thought she might be within earshot. "Grandma Martha!" She rounded a bend in the trail and nearly collided with her grandmother, who was making her way steadily along the path, a small cloth bag of mushrooms in her. And Emma. What on earth? Martha started, taking in her granddaughter's disheveled appearance and wild eyes. There's a man back there. He grabbed me, Emma gasped, the words tumbling out between breaths. And a mountain lion, it just appeared. Martha's expression shifted instantly from confusion to alert concern. She took Emma by the shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman her age. Are you hurt? She asked, eyes scanning Emma for any sign of injury. Emma shook her head. No, just scared. The mountain lion, it came between us, almost like it was protecting me. A strange look crossed Martha's face. Not disbelief, as Emma might have expected, but something more complex. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. We need to get back to the cabin, Martha said firmly. Now. And then we'll call the ranger. Station about this man. As they hurried back along the trail, Emma kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see either the man or the mountain lion following them. But the forest behind them remained still and empty. The mountain lion, Emma said as they walked briskly. It was so strange, Grandma. It didn't act like a wild animal. It positioned itself between me and that man, like it was deliberately shielding me. Martha didn't immediately respond, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, careful. The creatures of these woods have their own wisdom, Emma, their own ways of knowing who belongs and who doesn't. She paused, then added more quietly, and they remember those who respect them. Emma wanted to press further, sensing there was more her grandmother wasn't saying, but they had reached the edge of the property. The cabin stood before them, solid and reassuring in the afternoon light. Only when they were inside, door locked behind them, did Emma feel her racing heart begin to slow. Martha moved, with surprising efficiency, locking doors and closing curtains before picking up the landline phone. Cell service was spotty at best in these mountains, and her grandmother had never bothered to upgrade from the reliable old corded phone that hung in the kitchen. Yes, Harry, it's Martha Taylor, she said when someone answered. There was an incident on the new trail by Blackwater Creek. My granddaughter Emma was approached by a man, threatened her. She paused, listening. No, she's safe. We're back at the cabin now. Another pause. That's the strange part, Harry. A mountain lion intervened. Emma sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that Martha had insisted she drink. For the shock. She watched her grandmother's face carefully during the conversation, noting how Martha showed no surprise or disbelief when describing the mountain lion's behavior, as if such a thing were perfectly normal. Yes, I think it's the one your wildlife team has been tracking, Martha continued. The male will be here if you need to send someone over to take a statement. She hung up and turned to Emma. That was Harry Jenkins, head ranger. He's sending a patrol out to search the area, but he doubts they'll find your attacker. Men like that tend to disappear quickly. Grandma, Emma said, setting down her mug, you didn't seem surprised about the mountain lion. You said the male, like you know it. Martha settled into the chair across from Emma, her weathered hands folding together on the tabletop. There was a moment of consideration in her eyes, as if she were measuring how much to share. There's a research team that's been working in these parts for about a year now, she finally said. Wildlife biologists studying the mountain lions that have returned to the area after the conservation efforts to reduce deforestation. That particular male has been spotted several times near the property. He generally avoids humans. But he didn't avoid me, Emma pressed. He positioned himself between me and that man. That's not normal mountain lion behavior, is it? Martha's eyes, so similar to Emma's own, seemed to hold secrets accumulated over decades in these woods. No, she admitted. It's not typical. Before Emma could ask further questions, a knock at the door interrupted them. Martha rose to answer it, checking through the peephole before opening the door to a tall man in a forest ranger uniform. "Harry," she greeted him. "That was quick." "I was already in the area," he replied, stepping inside and removing his hat. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair cut short and a face tanned from years outdoors. His expression was serious, but kind as he turned to Emma. "You must be Emma. I'm Harry Jenkins, Chief Ranger for Whispering Pines. Your grandmother's told me a lot about you over the years." Emma stood, still feeling slightly shaky. "Nice to meet you." Harry took a seat at the kitchen table after declining Martha's offer of coffee. "I'd like to hear exactly what happened, if you're up to it," he said gently. Emma recounted the encounter, the man's sudden appearance, his threatening behavior, and the unexpected intervention of the mountain lion. As she spoke, she noticed Harry and her grandmother exchanging glances that suggested an unspoken communication. "Can you describe this man?" Harry asked when she'd finished. "Tall, dark hair, maybe mid-30s. He was wearing hiking gear. Looked like he knew his way around the woods." Emma paused, remembering a detail. "He knew Grandma Martha by name. Said he'd been watching me since I arrived yesterday." Harry's expression darkened. "That's concerning. We've had reports of a stranger hanging around the outskirts of town, but no one's gotten a good look at him." He pulled out a small notepad. "Anything else you can remember? Any distinguishing features?" Emma closed her eyes, trying to recall details. He had a scar on his right hand, across the knuckles, and his accent wasn't local. Sounded more West Coast, maybe? Harry noted this down, then turned to the more unusual aspect of her story. "Now about this mountain lion. You're certain it was deliberately positioning itself between you and this man?" "Absolutely," Emma said firmly. "It wasn't interested in me at all. It was focused entirely on him, like it perceived him as the threat." Harry nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something. "We've been tracking a small population of mountain lions that have returned to this area, part of a larger ecological study." He glanced at Martha. "Your grandmother has been helping us, actually. She knows these woods better than anyone." "You never mentioned you were working with wildlife researchers," Emma said to Martha, unable to keep a hint of accusation from her voice. Martha shrugged. "Never came up in our phone calls." The slight emphasis on phone calls wasn't lost on Emma. There had been so little real communication between them over the past few years, just surface-level updates and polite inquiries. "The mountain lion you encountered is likely the adult male we've been monitoring," Harry continued. "He's established a territory that includes parts of your grandmother's property. Usually keeps his distance from humans, though." He hesitated, then added, "What you described, the protective positioning, that's highly unusual behavior. I'd like your permission to share your account with our research team. They'd be very interested." "Of course," Emma nodded. "But why would a wild predator protect a human from another human? That doesn't make any sense." Again, that look between Harry and Martha. Emma was beginning to find it irritating. "What aren't you telling me?" she demanded. Martha sighed deeply. "Harry, would you excuse us for a moment? I need to have a talk with my granddaughter." The ranger nodded understandingly. "I'll head out and organize a search of the area. Martha, you have my cell if you need anything." He paused at the door. "Emma, try not to worry. These woods are generally very safe. What happened today was an anomaly." After Harry left, silence fell between Emma and her grandmother. Martha seemed to be gathering her thoughts, her fingers tracing the wood grain of the table. "There are things about Whispering Pines, about our family, that I've never told you," she finally said. "I wasn't sure you were ready, or interested for that matter." Emma felt a flicker of irritation. "I'm not a child anymore, Grandma. And clearly there's something going on here that involves me, considering a mountain lion just intervened when I was in danger." Martha nodded, accepting the rebuke. "You're right, walk with me." She led Emma to the back of the cabin, to a room Emma had always known as Grandma's study. a small space lined with bookshelves and featuring a large antique desk positioned beneath a window that overlooked the forest. It was a room Emma had been allowed to enter as a child, but certain cabinets and drawers had always been off limits. Martha went to one of these cabinets now, removing a small key from around her neck. The lock turned with a soft click, and she withdrew a leather-bound journal that looked decades old, its pages yellowed and corners worn smooth with handling. "This belonged to my grandmother, your great-great-grandmother Eleanor Taylor," Martha explained, setting the book gently on the desk. "She was the first of our family to settle in Whispering Pines back in 1892. Emma approached the desk cautiously, drawn by the age and obvious significance of the journal. "I don't understand what this has to do with what happened today." "Eleanor came here because she had a gift," Martha said, opening the journal carefully to reveal pages filled with elegant, flowing handwriting, a connection to the natural world that went beyond what most people experience. She could sense things, the changing of seasons before any physical signs appeared, approaching storms when the sky was still clear. Animals responded to her differently than to others. Emma stared at the journal, then at her grandmother, uncertain how to respond. This sounded like the beginning of a fairy tale, not an explanation. "Our family has always had a special relationship with these forests," Martha continued, seemingly untroubled by Emma's skepticism. "Not all of us inherit the gift to the same degree. Your mother didn't have much of it. Maybe that's why she was so eager to leave for the city. But you, Emma," she looked up, meeting her granddaughter's eyes. "Even as a little girl, you showed signs." "Signs of what?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The wildlife would approach you when you played at the forest edge. Birds would land closer to you than to other people. You could find your way home through the woods even when the path wasn't clear." Martha smiled gently. "I always hoped you'd grow to understand it, to develop it. But then you left for college and the city and, well, these gifts can fade when they're not nurtured." Emma shook her head, struggling to process what her grandmother was suggesting. "Are you saying I have some kind of supernatural connection to animals? That's why the mountain lion protected me?" "Grandma, that's not supernatural," Martha interrupted firmly. "Natural. Very natural. Just rare in today's world, where most people have lost their connection to the earth entirely." She flipped through the journal to a specific page where a detailed drawing of a mountain lion was accompanied by dense text. Eleanor documented her experiences, including a very similar encounter to yours. Emma leaned closer, trying to make out the faded handwriting. The passage described an incident where Eleanor had been threatened by a man while gathering herbs in the forest, only to have a mountain lion appear and drive the man away. "This can't be real," Emma murmured, but even as she said it, memories surfaced. A fawn approaching her in the backyard when she was 9, birds that would eat from her palm when they ignored others, the time she'd wandered off the trail at 11 years old and found her way back despite the gathering darkness. "The research team Harry mentioned," Martha said, closing the journal carefully. "They're not just studying the mountain lion's return to the area. They're specifically interested in unusual interactions between the wildlife and humans, particularly our family." Emma stepped back from the desk, suddenly needing space. "So, these researchers know about this gift?" "Not exactly," Martha replied. "They know there's something unusual about the wildlife behavior around certain people in Whispering Pines. They're scientists. They're looking for ecological or biological explanations, which is fine by me." She smiled slightly. "Our family has always kept the full extent of our connection private. People tend to misunderstand what they can't explain." Emma sank into a chair, trying to reconcile this new information with her understanding of the world, a world defined by the concrete, realities of city life, deadlines and logic. "I need time to process this," she said finally. Martha nodded understandingly. Of course you do, but time might be something we don't have much of. She looked out the window at the darkening forest. That man who approached you, the one who admitted he's been watching you, I don't think his interest is random. A chill ran through Emma. What do you mean? There have been rumors in town, Martha said, her voice lowering as if the walls themselves might be listening. Strangers asking questions about the special relationship some locals have with the forest. Most people dismiss it as superstition, but she trailed off, then continued more firmly. Harry didn't want to worry you, but there have been other incidents. People approached in the woods, questioned about their connections to the wildlife. By the same man? Emma asked. We don't know. The descriptions vary. Martha returned to the table, resting her hands on Emma's shoulders. What I do know is that you're part of this now, whether you want to be or not. That mountain lion recognized something in you, something that made it act against its natural instincts to protect you. Emma felt overwhelmed, caught between disbelief and the undeniable reality of what she'd experienced. Outside, the day was fading. The forest beyond, the cabin windows growing dark and mysterious. Somewhere in those trees, a mountain lion moved, a creature that had, for reasons she couldn't fully comprehend, chosen to stand between her and danger. What do we do now? She asked, looking up at her grandmother. Martha's expression was resolute. Tomorrow we visit the research center. It's time you learned more about what's happening in these woods and about your place in it. The Whispering Pines Wildlife Research Center wasn't what Emma had expected. Rather than a sterile laboratory filled with microscopes and specimen jars, it was a collection of rustic cabins nestled at the edge of a meadow, with a larger central building that appeared to serve as both headquarters and community gathering space. Solar panels glinted on the rooftops, and a small wind turbine spun lazily in the morning breeze. The entire facility seemed designed to blend harmoniously with the surrounding environment. They set up here about 18 months ago, Martha explained as she parked her aging pickup truck in the small gravel lot. The director, Dr. Samantha Mitchell, is doing groundbreaking work on ecosystem rehabilitation and wildlife behavior. She gave Emma a significant look, particularly interested in predator species returning to previously abandoned territories. Emma had slept fitfully the night before, her dreams filled with prowling mountain lions and shadowy figures watching from the trees. The revelations about her family's supposed gift had left her feeling unmoored, caught between skepticism and the undeniable memory of the mountain lion's intervention. Part of her hoped the researchers would provide a rational, scientific explanation that would make sense of everything. Harry called ahead, Martha continued as they walked toward the main building. Dr. Mitchell is expecting us. The interior of the main building was open and airy, with large windows that framed views of the surrounding forest. Maps, wildlife photographs, and tracking charts covered the walls. At the center stood a large, three-dimensional topographical model of the Whispering Pines region, complete with tiny flags marking what Emma assumed were wildlife sightings or research stations. A woman in her early 40s looked up from a computer as they entered. She had curly brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wore hiking pants with a button-up shirt bearing the research center's logo. The smile that spread across her face when she saw Martha was genuine and warm. "Martha, good to see you," she said, crossing the room to greet them. "And you must be Emma. I'm Sam Mitchell." She extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. "Harry filled me in on what happened yesterday. How are you holding up?" "I'm processing," Emma replied honestly, shaking the offered hand. Dr. Mitchell nodded understandingly. "I can imagine. Being confronted by both a threatening human and a mountain lion in the same day would rattle anyone." She gestured toward a seating area near one of the large windows. "Let's talk." They settled into comfortable chairs, arranged around a low table. Through the window, Emma could see researchers moving between buildings, carrying equipment or hunched over notebooks. "First," Dr. Mitchell began, her tone becoming more serious, "I want to assure you that we've increased patrols around the perimeter of our research area. The man you encountered shouldn't be able to approach undetected again. The local sheriff has also been notified." "Thank you," Emma said, though she wasn't entirely reassured. The forest was vast, with countless places someone could hide if they were determined. "Now," the researcher continued, leaning forward slightly, "I'd like to hear about your encounter with the mountain lion, in your own words, if you don't mind. Harry gave me the basics, but I'd appreciate the details." Emma recounted the experience as accurately as she could, trying to stick to observable facts rather than interpretations. When she described how the mountain lion had positioned itself between her and her attacker, Dr. Mitchell's eyes flickered briefly to Martha. "That's consistent with the report Harry gave me," she said, when Emma finished. "It's also consistent with something we've been observing in this region for some time now." She stood and walked to a filing cabinet, from which she extracted a folder. "We've documented 17 instances in the past year where large predators, mostly mountain lions, but occasionally wolves, have exhibited unusual protective behaviors towards specific human individuals." She laid several photographs on the table. They showed trail camera images of mountain lions following at a distance behind hikers or positioned near cabins at the forest edge, not stalking, but seemingly watching over the human occupants. "In normal circumstances, these predators avoid human contact," Dr. Mitchell explained. "But here in Whispering Pines, we're seeing unusual patterns. And interestingly," she glanced at Martha again, "these behaviors seem concentrated around certain families. The Taylors being one of them." Emma felt a flutter of unease. "My grandmother mentioned your research last night. She also shared some family theories about why this might be happening." Dr. Mitchell smiled diplomatically. "Martha and I've had many fascinating conversations about local folklore and family traditions. The scientific community sometimes dismisses indigenous and local knowledge too quickly. I prefer to keep an open mind." "So, what's your scientific explanation?" Emma pressed. "Why would a wild predator put itself at risk to protect a human it's never encountered before?" The researcher leaned back in her chair, considering her response. "We have several hypotheses we're exploring. One involves pheromones. Certain families might produce distinctive chemical signatures that these animals have learned to associate with positive experiences over generations. Another theory suggests that some humans may unconsciously exhibit body language that predators interpret as non-threatening or even familiar." Neither explanation seemed sufficient to account for what Emma had experienced, but she nodded anyway. "May I show you something?" Dr. Mitchell asked, rising from her chair. "It might help contextualize what happened." She led them to another room dominated by large computer monitors, displaying maps overlaid with colorful tracking data. A younger man with glasses and a neatly trimmed beard was studying one of the screens intently. "Michael, could you pull up the data on M7, please? Yesterday's tracking information." The man nodded and typed a command. One of the screens changed to show a map of the forest area near Martha's cabin, with a red line tracing a path through it. "This is the adult male mountain lion we've been tracking. The one we believe you encountered," Dr. Mitchell explained. "We call him M7. The red line shows his movements yesterday." Emma studied the screen, watching as the line meandered through the forest in what appeared to be a regular patrol route. But then, around the time of her encounter, the line changed direction abruptly, moving with purpose toward the spot where she had been. "He deviated from his normal pattern," Dr. Mitchell said. "And what's most interesting is that he was nearly a mile away when he changed course. too far to have heard or smelled the confrontation. It's almost as if he sensed I was in danger, Emma finished, quietly. Dr. Mitchell didn't confirm or deny this interpretation. Instead, she zoomed in on a section of the map. After the encounter, M7 followed you and Martha at a distance all the way back to the cabin. He remained in the vicinity for several hours afterward, patrolling the perimeter of the property before returning to his normal territory. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. He was guarding us? That would be my interpretation, yes, the researcher nodded, which is extraordinary behavior for a solitary predator with no evolutionary reason to protect humans. Martha, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, spoke up. Show her the ancestry study, Sam. Dr. Mitchell hesitated, then nodded. Michael, could you pull up the genetics file, the Taylor comparison? The screen changed to show what appeared to be DNA sequencing data alongside photographs of various residents of Whispering Pines. Emma recognized some of the faces. Tom Wilson from the general store, an elderly couple who lived near her grandmother, and Martha herself. What is this? Emma asked. Part of our research involves voluntary DNA sampling from local residents, Dr. Mitchell explained. We're looking for genetic markers that might explain the unusual wildlife interactions. With consent, we've been comparing these samples to trace elements found in soil, plant life, and even extracted from shed fur of local wildlife. She pointed to a highlighted section of data. This is where it gets interesting. We've identified unusual genetic markers present in about 12% of Whispering Pines residents, markers that also appear in modified form in the local wildlife populations. Emma stared at the screen, trying to process the implications. You're saying we share DNA with mountain lions? Not exactly, Dr. Mitchell clarified quickly. It's more that there are genetic signatures that suggest a form of coevolution, as if the human and animal populations in this region have been influencing each other's development for centuries in ways we don't fully understand. She zoomed in further on the data. The Taylor family shows the highest concentration of these markers, particularly you, Martha. She glanced at Emma. We haven't had the opportunity to test you yet, but based on inheritance patterns, you likely carry them as well. Emma felt like the floor was tilting beneath her. What had seemed like her grandmother's fanciful folklore suddenly had a potential scientific basis. Not supernatural, as Martha had insisted, but perhaps something even more profound. A biological connection to the land and its creatures that science was only beginning to comprehend. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Emma asked her grandmother. Martha's expression was serene. Would you have believed me over the phone from Chicago with no context? You needed to experience it yourself first. Dr. Mitchell closed the file on the screen. What your grandmother calls a gift we're studying as a remarkable example of human-wildlife coevolution. The implications for conservation and ecosystem management are enormous. She turned to Emma, her expression earnest. But there's another reason I wanted to show you this today. You should know that not everyone views this research positively. What do you mean? Emma asked. There are interests that would exploit this kind of connection if they could, Dr. Mitchell said carefully. Pharmaceutical companies interested in the genetic components, tourism operators who would commercialize wildlife whisperer experiences, even military applications for human-animal cooperation. You think that's who the man in the forest works for? Emma asked, the pieces beginning to fall into place. We've had several security breaches in the past 6 months, the researcher confirmed. Equipment tampered with, attempts to hack our data. 2 weeks ago, one of our researchers was approached by a man asking very specific questions about our genetic studies. Martha reached over and took Emma's hand. That's why I've been helping. with the research center's security. That's why I've been cautious about sharing certain family knowledge. Emma looked between her grandmother and Dr. Mitchell, the full weight of the situation settling on her. So I'm not just caught up in some local folklore. I'm potentially in the middle of, what, industrial espionage against a conservation project? That's one way to put it, Dr. Mitchell said grimly. Martha has been instrumental in helping us protect our research. She knows these forests better than anyone, knows when something or someone doesn't belong. Which brings us to why we're really here today, Martha said, squeezing Emma's hand. It's not just about explaining what happened yesterday, it's about asking for your help. Emma felt a nervous laugh bubble up. My help? I'm a graphic designer from Chicago. What could I possibly do? Dr. Mitchell's expression was serious. You've shown a strong connection to the local wildlife, stronger even than we anticipated. The mountain lion's response to you yesterday was unprecedented in our research. And now that this connection has been activated, for lack of a better term, you have an opportunity. We need someone who can help us communicate with the forest in ways our technology can't, Martha added. Someone young, with fresh eyes, who also carries the old connection, someone who can bridge worlds. Emma stared at them both, momentarily speechless. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been finishing a branding project for a Chicago tech startup. Now she was being asked to, what? Become some kind of wildlife ambassador? I have a life in Chicago, she said finally. A career, responsibilities. Of course you do, Martha acknowledged. But you came here seeking something, didn't you? A connection you felt was missing. The question struck closer to home than Emma wanted to admit. Hadn't she been feeling increasingly hollow in the city? Hadn't she chosen to spend her vacation here rather than on a beach somewhere, driven by some nameless longing? No, we're not asking you to abandon your life, Dr. Mitchell said gently, but perhaps to consider expanding it. We could use someone with your design skills for our educational materials, and your connection to the wildlife offers research opportunities that could advance our understanding enormously. Emma stood abruptly, needing space to think. She walked to the window, gazing out at the forest that suddenly seemed both more mysterious and more familiar than ever before. I need time, she said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course, Dr. Mitchell nodded. Take all the time you need, but... She hesitated, then continued more urgently. Be careful. The man you encountered yesterday knows who you are and what you might represent. And he's likely not working alone. As if to emphasize her warning, one of the researchers burst into the room, slightly out of breath. Dr. Mitchell, we've got a problem. 3 of our remote cameras have been destroyed overnight, and the tracking signal for M7 has gone silent. The research center erupted into organized chaos. Dr. Mitchell immediately began issuing instructions, dispatching teams to check the damaged cameras and search for signs of M7. Emma stood frozen by the window, watching as researchers grabbed equipment and headed for vehicles. What does it mean that his signal went silent? She asked, her voice barely audible above the commotion. Dr. Mitchell's expression was grim. It could be a technical malfunction, but given the timing and the damaged cameras, it's more likely someone deliberately disabled his tracking collar. She turned to Michael, who was already pulling up maps on the main screen. When and where was his last known location? Signal terminated at 4:17 a.m., approximately 2 miles northeast of Martha's property, Michael reported, highlighting an area on the digital map. Martha had gone very still, her weathered face set in lines of concern. That's near the old quarry, she said quietly. Dr. Mitchell nodded. Perfect spot for an ambush, isolated, difficult terrain, cell signals blocked by the rock faces. She grabbed a radio from a charging station. I'm heading out with Team B. Michael, coordinate from here and keep the sheriff updated. She paused, looking at Emma and Martha. You two should go back to the cabin. It's safer No, Emma interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. If someone's targeting M7 because of what happened yesterday, because of me, I want to help find him. Dr. Mitchell exchanged a glance with Martha, who gave a slight nod. All right, the researcher decided, but you stay with me, and you follow instructions exactly. This isn't just about finding a missing mountain lion anymore. Whoever's out there has escalated from surveillance to active interference. Within minutes, Emma found herself in the back of a rugged all-terrain vehicle bouncing along a narrow forest road with Dr. Mitchell driving and Martha beside her in the passenger seat. 2 other researchers followed in a separate vehicle loaded with tracking equipment. The quarry hasn't been operational for decades, Martha explained as they drove. It's become a natural feature of the landscape now. A horseshoe-shaped cliff face with a small lake at the bottom where rainwater has collected. The wildlife uses it as a watering hole. Perfect place to target a predator, Dr. Mitchell added, maneuvering around a fallen branch. They come to drink at predictable times. Emma gripped the door handle as the vehicle jolted over a particularly rough section of road. Who would do this? What do they hope to gain? Hard to say for certain, Dr. Mitchell replied, keeping her eyes on the treacherous path. Could be someone looking to capture a live specimen for study. Our research has generated interest in the scientific community. Could be a trophy hunter who heard rumors about our unusually large mountain lions. Or it could be related to our genetic research. Someone wanting DNA samples without going through proper channels. They drove in tense silence for several more minutes before the road became too narrow for vehicles. Dr. Mitchell parked and they continued on foot, following a barely visible trail that Martha navigated with confidence despite her age. The quarry is just ahead, she said, pointing to where the tree line thinned. We should approach quietly. They moved forward cautiously, the 2 researchers from the second vehicle hanging back slightly with their equipment. As they neared the edge of the woods, Emma felt an inexplicable sensation, a prickling awareness that raised the hair on her arms. Something's wrong, she whispered, not knowing why she was so certain but unable to ignore the feeling. Martha looked at her sharply, then nodded. I feel it too. Dr. Mitchell signaled for everyone to stop. What is it? I don't know exactly, Emma admitted. Just a sense that we need to be careful. The researcher studied her face for a moment, then made a decision. We'll circle around to the eastern approach. It's less exposed. They altered their course, moving parallel to the quarry edge, but staying within the cover of trees. The feeling of wrongness intensified in Emma's chest as they progressed, accompanied by an increasing sense of urgency. Without consciously deciding to, she found herself moving faster, pulling ahead of the group. Emma, wait! Martha called softly, but Emma was already breaking into a jog, guided by an instinct she couldn't explain. She reached a point where the trees thinned enough to offer a view of the quarry below. Crouching behind a large boulder, she peered over the edge and felt her breath catch. At the bottom of the quarry, near the edge of the small lake, a cage-like trap had been set up, large, enough to hold a mountain lion, and prowling around it, clearly agitated but thankfully still free, was M7. Even from this distance, Emma could see that something was wrong with his tracking collar. It hung askew, partially detached. More disturbing was the presence of 2 men near the opposite side of the quarry. They wore camouflage clothing and carried what appeared to be tranquilizer rifles. They were moving slowly toward the mountain lion, trying to maneuver it toward the trap. Dr. Mitchell and Martha caught up to Emma, both breathing hard from the unexpected sprint. Poachers, Dr. Mitchell whispered, pulling out binoculars for a closer look. Professional equipment. They've disabled his collar but left it attached to avoid suspicion if he's spotted from a distance. We need to call for backup, one of the other researchers suggested, reaching for his radio. No signal. Down here, Dr. Mitchell replied grimly. We'd have to go back to the vehicles. Emma's eyes remained fixed on the mountain lion. M7 seemed aware of the danger he was in, but the men had positioned themselves to cut off his most obvious escape routes. He paced back and forth, growing increasingly cornered. "They're going to capture him," she said, a surge of protectiveness welling up inside her. "We can't let that happen." "We're unarmed, Emma," Dr. Mitchell cautioned, "and outnumbered. The best we can do is try to reach the sheriff and—" "No," Martha interrupted, her voice strangely calm. "That won't be necessary." She turned to her granddaughter, eyes bright with a knowledge that seemed ancient. "Emma, do you remember what I taught you when you were little? About calling the birds?" Emma stared at her grandmother, memories surfacing. From childhood, standing at the forest edge, learning to make a specific soft clicking sound with her tongue that would bring curious chickadees to her outstretched palms. "You think I can—" "Or call a mountain lion?" she asked incredulously. "Not call," Martha corrected. "Connect. The ability has always been in you. Yesterday proved that. It's about intention, about energy." She took Emma's hands in her own. "Close your eyes. Feel the forest around you. Find that place inside that recognizes you belong here." Dr. Mitchell looked between them, clearly torn between scientific skepticism and the undeniable anomalies her research had documented. "What are you suggesting, Martha?" "Something your data has been trying to tell you," Martha replied, without taking her eyes off Emma. "That there are connections between the people of this land and its creatures that go beyond what your instruments can measure." Emma hesitated only briefly before closing her eyes. What did she have to lose? The mountain lion had already acted against its nature once to protect her. Perhaps there was something to her grandmother's beliefs after all. She took a deep breath, trying to quiet the logical, city-trained part of her mind that insisted this was nonsense. Instead, she focused on the sensations around her. The scent of pine, the subtle sounds of the forest, the feel of the earth beneath her feet. She thought of the mountain lion, remembering the moment it had stood between her and danger, its amber eyes alert and purposeful. "Think of a connection," Martha murmured. "A thread between you and him, not commanding, not controlling, just recognizing." Emma tried to visualize it, a golden thread stretching from her consciousness toward the mountain lion. To her surprise, the visualization came easily, as if she'd done this many times before. With it came a wave of emotion, concern, protectiveness, a desire to help. A strange sensation spread through her body, warmth that started in her chest and radiated outward. When she opened her eyes, she gasped. The mountain lion had stopped pacing and was now perfectly still, its head raised, looking directly toward their position, despite the fact that they were well hidden and upwind. "It worked," Dr. Mitchell whispered, astonishment evident in her voice. "He senses you." One of the men below noticed the mountain lion's change in behavior and raised his rifle, preparing to take a shot with what Emma presumed was a tranquilizer dart. Without thinking, Emma stood up. "Emma, no," Dr. Mitchell hissed, reaching for her arm, but Martha held the researcher back. "Let her," Martha said firmly. "Watch." Emma stepped out from behind the boulder, fully visible now at the quarry's edge. The mountain lion remained focused on her, ears forward, tail still. The men, noticing this change, turned to follow the animal's gaze. "Hey!" one of them shouted upon spotting Emma. "Get out of here! This is dangerous!" Emma ignored him, keeping her attention on the mountain lion. The connection she had visualized now felt real, a palpable link between herself and the animal. Without words, she tried to project a simple message. "Danger. Come to me." The mountain lion's muscles tensed, visibly. The men, realizing something unusual was happening, both raised their rifles now, one aimed at the mountain lion, the other swinging toward Emma. "Last warning," the second man called. "Leave now or we'll consider you interfering with a legitimate wildlife management operation." The pretense confirmed Dr. Mitchell's suspicion. These weren't random poachers, but people with enough knowledge to pose as officials if confronted. Emma remained still, focused. The mountain lion lowered into a crouch, and for a heart-stopping moment, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake, if the connection she felt was merely imagination. Then M7 moved. Not toward the trap, but in a powerful surge away from the men, bounding across the quarry floor toward the sloped eastern edge, where a deer trail provided a possible ascent. The men swore, the first one firing his rifle, but the dart missed as the mountain lion's movements became unpredictable, zigzagging, rather than running in a straight line. "He's coming up here," Dr. Mitchell realized aloud. "We should get back." "No," Emma said with quiet certainty. "He won't hurt us." The mountain lion reached the deer trail and began to climb, moving with remarkable speed and agility up the steep incline. The men below scrambled after him, but they were at a disadvantage, burdened by their equipment and unfamiliarity with the terrain. Emma stepped back into the tree line, Martha and the others following her lead. Within moments, the mountain lion crested the quarry edge, amber eyes immediately finding Emma. It paused, sides heaving from exertion, then moved deliberately toward her. Dr. Mitchell inhaled sharply. "Emma, don't move." But Emma wasn't afraid. The mountain lion approached until it was about 10 feet away, then stopped, regarding her with an intelligence that seemed beyond animal instinct. Up close, she could see the damaged collar, hanging by a single attachment point. "Thank you," she said softly, not feeling foolish at all for speaking to the animal. As if in response, the mountain lion lowered its head slightly before turning, to look back toward the quarry edge, ears flicking as sounds of the men's approach grew louder. "We need to move," Dr. Mitchell urged. "They'll be here soon." Emma nodded, her eyes still on the mountain lion. "Go," she whispered to it. "Find safety." To the researchers' visible amazement, the mountain lion turned and loped into the forest, quickly disappearing among the trees. Moments later, they heard the men reach the top of the quarry, cursing at their missed opportunity. "This way," Martha said quietly, guiding them deeper into the forest, away from the men's voices. "I know a path they won't find." They moved quickly and silently through the woods, Martha leading with the confidence of someone who had walked these paths for decades. After about 15 minutes, the sounds of pursuit had faded completely. "We need to get back to the vehicles and call the sheriff," Dr. Mitchell said. Those men were well equipped and knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't opportunistic, it was planned. Emma nodded absently, still processing what had just happened. The connection she had felt with the mountain lion had been real. Not imagination, not coincidence. Something her grandmother had known about all along, had tried to nurture in her as a child before the city and adulthood had pulled her away from this part of herself. "You did well," Martha said softly, falling into step beside Emma. "Better than I expected for someone who's been away so long." "What exactly did I do?" Emma asked. "What is this ability?" Martha smiled. "Nothing mystical, nothing supernatural, just a way of being that most humans have forgotten, a recognition that we're part of the natural world, not separate from it. Some families, like ours, have maintained that connection through generations. The research center calls it genetics. I call it remembering." When they reached the vehicles, Dr. Mitchell immediately radioed for assistance, reporting the incident and describing the men to the sheriff's department. By the time they returned to the research center, law enforcement had set up checkpoints on the main roads out of Whispering Pines. "They won't catch them," Martha predicted as they sat in the center's common room, waiting for updates. "Men like that know the back roads probably have a plane waiting at some small airstrip, but they've lost their target, and that's what matters." Emma was quiet, watching through the window as the day began to fade, thinking about the mountain lion and the connection they had shared. Something had awakened in her, something that had perhaps been dormant but never truly gone. "What happens now?" she finally asked, turning to Dr. Mitchell and her grandmother. The researcher smiled. "Scientifically speaking, what happened today represents a breakthrough in our understanding of human-wildlife interactions. The implications for conservation are enormous." She hesitated, then added more personally, "It also means we need to be more vigilant. Word will spread about what happened, however the story gets twisted in the telling." "And practically speaking?" Emma pressed. "That's up to you," Martha replied. "You have a life in Chicago, a career you've worked hard to build." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of decision. Her spring break would end in 4 days. Her clients would be expecting her return. Her apartment, with its designer furniture and city views, would be waiting. Yet something fundamental had shifted. The hollow feeling that had driven her to visit Whispering Pines in the first place had been filled by something unexpected. A sense of purpose, of belonging, of reconnection, not just with her grandmother, but with a part of herself she had nearly lost. "I think," she said slowly, "I might need to reevaluate some things." 3 months later, Emma sat on the porch of her grandmother's cabin, laptop open, as she put the finishing touches on a brochure for the Whispering Pines Wildlife Conservation Initiative. She had resigned from her position at the Chicago design firm, but had negotiated to keep several key clients, working remotely from Montana. Dr. Mitchell had eagerly hired her to create educational materials for the research center, allowing her to combine her design skills with her newfound passion for conservation. The transition hadn't been without challenges. City conveniences were scarce, internet was occasionally unreliable, and she sometimes missed the energy of urban life. But these inconveniences paled beside what she had gained: a deeper relationship with her grandmother, a purpose that felt meaningful, and a growing understanding of her unique connection to the natural world. Martha emerged from the cabin carrying 2 mugs of herbal tea. "How's the work coming?" "Almost done," Emma replied, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. "Dr. Mitchell thinks these materials will help secure the additional funding they need for the expanded research program." Martha settled into the chair beside her, gazing out at the forest edge. "Any sign of your friend today?" Emma smiled. The mountain lion, M7 to the researchers, but she had taken to calling him Emerson in her mind, had been a regular visitor to the property since their encounter at the quarry. He never came too close to the cabin, maintaining a respectful distance, but his presence was a constant reminder of the bond they shared. "Not yet, but it's still early. He usually patrols near sunset." The investigation into the men at the quarry had yielded few concrete results. They had, indeed, escaped the area before law enforcement could intercept them, but heightened security measures at the research center, combined with increased community awareness, had prevented further incidents. Emma's encounter had been documented as part of Dr. Mitchell's ongoing research, though the full extent of her connection with the mountain lion remained between her grandmother, and a few trusted researchers. "I've been thinking," Emma said, setting her mug down on the small table between them, "about that journal of great-great-grandmother Eleanor's. There are stories there that should be preserved, knowledge that might be valuable to the research center's work." Martha nodded, a pleased expression crossing her face. "I was hoping you might take an interest in that. There's so much wisdom in those pages, observations about wildlife behavior, plant properties, seasonal patterns, things science is only now beginning to confirm." "I thought I might digitize it," Emma suggested. "Create an archive that combines her knowledge with current research, a bridge between traditional understanding and modern science." "A bridge," Martha repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, that's exactly what we need, what the world needs." She reached over and took Emma's hand. "I'm glad you came back, Emma. Not just for my sake, but for yours, and perhaps for theirs too." She nodded toward the forest, where the creatures of whispering pines went about their ancient cycles of life. As if summoned by the thought, a movement at the tree line caught Emma's attention. There, partially concealed by the gathering dusk but unmistakable to her now attuned senses, was Emerson. The mountain lion sat at the forest edge, amber eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. Emma didn't need to close her eyes to feel the connection anymore. It was always there, a quiet awareness humming beneath her everyday consciousness, a gift from her ancestors, nurtured by her grandmother and now fully awakened in her. "Hello, friend," she whispered. The mountain lion's ears flicked forward. At the sound of her voice, though she knew he couldn't actually hear her from this distance, but he could feel her, just as she could feel him. A silent communication that transcended ordinary understanding. After a moment, he rose and melted back into the forest, continuing his evening patrol. Emma smiled, turning back to her grandmother. "You know," she said, "when I first arrived, I thought I was just coming for a short visit, to reconnect with you, maybe find some peace and quiet away from the city." Martha's eyes twinkled. "And instead I found my way back to something I didn't even know I'd lost." Emma gestured toward the forest, now darkening as night approached. "A connection that goes beyond family ties, a belonging that's written in our DNA, as Dr. Mitchell would say. Or in our souls," Martha added with a gentle smile, "if you prefer the less scientific explanation." Emma laughed softly. "Maybe it's both." She closed her laptop, the work finished for the day. Science and soul, logic and intuition, city and forest. Maybe we don't have to choose just one way of being in the world. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky above whispering pines, Emma felt a sense of completion that had eluded her in Chicago. The path ahead wasn't entirely clear. There would be challenges in balancing her design career with her new role at the research center, in navigating the attention her unusual abilities might attract, in preserving the delicate balance between progress and protection. But for now, sitting beside her grandmother as night settled over the forest that had called her home, Emma Taylor was exactly where she needed to be, a bridge between worlds, a guardian of ancient connections, and a protector of the wilderness that had protected her when she needed it most. Dear listeners, we hope that Emma's journey from city life to rediscovering her deep connection with nature has moved you. This tale of finding one's true purpose and reconnecting with family legacies reminds us all of the power of returning to our roots. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist you can find by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed Emma and Martha's adventure with the mysterious mountain lion, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life's unexpected turns. What would you do if you discovered you had a special connection with nature? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join us tomorrow for another extraordinary tale.